Stella Kim didn't find out her marriage was ending because of a message, not because of lipstick, not because someone warned her. She found out because she accidentally heard the truth her husband thought she would never hear. And the worst part wasn't what Logan said. It was how calm he sounded when he said it. That morning had started like any other. Routine had always been Stella's way of maintaining control. Wake up at 6:10. Coffee at 6:25. News headlines scrolling silently on her tablet while the city outside their high-rise apartment slowly came alive. Seattle mornings always looked honest. Cold light reflecting off glass towers. Ferries moving like clockwork. People walking with purpose. Predictable systems. Predictable outcomes. She believed in systems. She believed in effort. She believed in building things that lasted, including her marriage. It was their 8th anniversary, though recently the number had started to feel less like a celebration and more like data. Duration, time invested, return uncertain. She opened her closet and paused between 2 dresses. One soft, one structure. She chose the structured one. Somewhere along the way she had learned that competence protected you better than hope. On the kitchen island sat a small white box wrapped carefully the night before. Inside was a miniature steel bridge model mounted on dark walnut wood. Their first design competition project. Back when Stella and Logan were just 2 exhausted architecture students eating cheap Thai food on the floor of their first apartment because they couldn't afford furniture yet. Back when Logan used to say, "One day we'll build things people depend on." She thought he meant together. They used to fall asleep over blueprints. Wake up and continue arguing about load distribution like it actually mattered more than sleep. Maybe it had. Maybe that was when things were most honest. By late morning, Stella left her firm earlier than scheduled. She told her assistant she had a personal appointment. That wasn't a lie. She just didn't know she was about to witness the end of something she had spent almost a decade maintaining. Traffic moved slowly through downtown. Stella barely noticed. Her mind was busy preparing the version of the conversation she hoped they would have. Something light, something adult, something repairable. She still believed problems could be solved if addressed early enough. That was how she approached everything. Buildings, contracts, relationships. Logan's studio occupied the corner of a newly renovated commercial block. Floor-to-ceiling glass, polished concrete, the smell of ambition and expensive coffee. She saw him before he saw her, standing at the central table, explaining something to his team. His posture is confident. His gestures are precise. The same presence that had once made her feel safe during the uncertain years when neither of them knew if their careers would survive. For a brief second, she felt relief. Maybe tonight would still matter. Maybe he remembered too. She entered quietly, not wanting to interrupt. His voice traveled down the corridor before she reached the main room. Steady, controlled, familiar. Then she heard something she wasn't meant to hear. She's everything Stella isn't. Her body didn't react immediately. Shock doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like stillness. Someone asked quietly, "What do you mean?" Logan didn't hesitate. "She's easy, not simple, just easy to be around." A short pause. "She doesn't measure everything, doesn't turn every decision into strategy. With her, I don't feel like I'm being evaluated." A woman laughed softly. "So you're saying your wife intimidates you?" Logan exhaled through his nose. "I'm saying she's built for pressure. Everything with Stella is performance, results, standards." Another pause. "With Jenna, I can breathe." That was the first time Stella heard the name, Jenna. Logan continued, unaware she was 10 steps away. "Jenna reminds me what life feels like when you're not constantly trying to prove something." No one noticed Stella. She didn't move, didn't interrupt, didn't drop the anniversary gift she was still holding. She just stood there holding the small steel bridge that once represented how their life started, realizing she was now holding physical evidence of how far they had drifted. There is a moment when understanding arrives before pain. It feels clinical, mechanical, like a diagnosis being confirmed. Something inside her quietly reorganized itself. Not heartbreak. Not yet. Recognition. She turned around before anyone saw her face, walked back toward the elevator with the same controlled pace she used in board meetings, pressed the button once, waited. The mirrored elevator doors opened and she stepped inside. Her reflection looked exactly the same. No tears, No visible damage. Just a woman in a tailored black dress holding a gift she now understood she would never give. The doors closed. Some marriages don't end with shouting. They end with information. The next day, Stella returned to work like nothing had changed, because externally, nothing had. Same meetings, same financial reviews, same deadlines. But internally, something had shifted from emotional processing to pattern recognition. That afternoon, while reviewing corporate expense approval, she noticed something small. A consulting reimbursement that didn't match a project timeline. Then another. Private dining charges submitted under vendor relations. Travel expenses Logan hadn't mentioned. Most spouses would have ignored it. Stella didn't. Her entire career had been built on one principle. Small inconsistencies always reveal larger structural problems. Logan used to joke, "You make chaos look organized." She used to think that was admiration. Now she understood. It was expectation. Logan hadn't wanted an equal partner. He had wanted reinforcement. Someone who absorbed pressure, maintained stability, solved problems before they became visible. Infrastructure, not partnership. That realization hurt more than Jenna, because Jenna wasn't the real story. The real story was this. Stella had spent years making Logan's life easier, and he had mistaken stability for something replaceable. That evening, Stella sat alone in their apartment. The anniversary gift is still unopened on the kitchen counter. She didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, she did something much more dangerous. She started thinking clearly. For the first time, she wasn't thinking like a wife trying to save a marriage. She was thinking like someone trying to understand a system failure. And Stella Kim was very good at understanding failures. What she didn't know yet was that within 3 weeks, she would discover Logan hadn't just been emotionally careless. He had been financially careless too. And Stella didn't forgive structural risk. She eliminated it. That night, Stella didn't cry. Not because she wasn't hurt, because something more dangerous had taken its place. Focus. While Logan slept in their bedroom, breathing evenly like a man whose life was still stable, Stella sat alone at the kitchen island with her laptop open. The anniversary gift still sat between them like evidence from a different life. She opened their shared financial dashboard out of habit more than suspicion. At first, nothing looked unusual. Balances were strong, investments stable, cash flow predictable. The life they built still looked structurally sound. But Stella had spent 10 years in development finance, and she knew something most people didn't. Fraud rarely announces itself. It whispers through patterns. She began scrolling slowly, expense by expense, charge by charge, date by date. And then she saw it. Not a large withdrawal, a small one. $2,400, categorized as vendor relations. 2 weeks later, $1,850, consulting hospitality. Then again, $3,100, project travel advance. Individually, they meant nothing. Together, they formed rhythm. And Stella believed in rhythm. She opened a second screen, cross-referenced dates, matched them against Logan's calendar. Every charge aligned with days he had said he was working late. Her pulse didn't rise. Her breathing didn't change. Instead, something else happened. Her brain did what it always did under pressure. It organized. She followed the transfers further. Rental payments, an apartment 3 miles from the university district, education payments to a private graduate program, restaurant reservations always for 2, always midweek, always quiet places. Logan wasn't just cheating. He was budgeting for it, using accounts Stella managed. Money she had structured, money she had protected, money she had multiplied. She leaned back slowly, not devastated, not shocked, just recalibrating. There is a moment when betrayal stops being emotional and becomes mathematical. Input, output, loss, exposure. And Stella realized something that hurt more than the affair itself. This wasn't impulsive. This was sustained, engineered, maintained. Which meant something worse. Logan hadn't just risked their marriage. He had risked her trust in her own judgment. And that Stella took personally. She kept digging. Name, Jenna Vale, graduate design fellow, age 26, joined Logan's studio 11 months earlier. Stella remembered her immediately. Jenna had once visited Stella's firm to thank her for funding a joint internship program. She had been polite, respectful, bright-eyed. "I hope one day I can build what you've built," she had said. Stella had smiled and wished her luck. She hadn't realized she was financing the environment where Jenna would replace her. That realization landed quietly, like truth usually does. Driving home earlier that evening, Stella had glanced at herself in the rearview mirror and noticed something strange. She didn't look broken. She looked awake, like someone who had just discovered the real rules of a game she didn't know she was playing. Betrayal rarely begins with lies. It begins when one person stops seeing the other as human and starts seeing them as utility. Stella had been utility, the stabilizer, the problem solver, the quiet force behind Logan's visible success. Logan used to say, "You're the reason I can take risks." She used to hear love. Now she heard dependence. That night, she opened a physical folder she hadn't touched in years. Home structure documents inside were the things people only review during disasters: asset structures, liability exposure, ownership percentages, authorization rights. She printed statements, highlighted transactions, drew connection lines. The story emerged clean and unforgiving, elegant in the way truth often is. Logan hadn't just betrayed affection. He had been quietly redirecting shared resources, not enough to trigger alarms, enough to prove intention. She closed the folder, not angry, certain. "He thought stability was infinite," she said quietly to the empty apartment. Then she added, "It isn't." 3 days later, Stella did something Logan would never expect. Nothing. No confrontation, no accusation, no emotional reaction. She became calm. War room calm. Because Stella knew something Logan didn't. Power shifts rarely happen during arguments. They happen during preparation. By the end of the week, Stella knew which accounts required dual approval, which ones didn't, which assets were protected, which weren't, which risks she had unknowingly been carrying alone, and which ones she was about to stop carrying. The following Tuesday, she drove past Logan's studio again, not to confront him, to observe. Observation always came before action. She parked across the street, watched through the glass. Logan leaned over a drafting table, confident, relaxed, unafraid. Jenna sat beside him, too close for colleagues, too comfortable for coincidence. They weren't touching, they didn't need to. Emotional proximity was already obvious, the kind of familiarity people develop when they believe no one is watching. Stella watched Logan laugh, really laugh. She hadn't seen that version of him in years. And strangely, that hurt less than she expected, because clarity was replacing confusion. After a few minutes, she stepped out of the car, walked across the street, entered the building. This time she didn't hesitate. The room quieted when she entered. Engineers stopped talking. Assistants looked up. Jenna froze mid-sentence. Logan turned. For the first time, Stella saw something she had never seen in his face before. Not guilt, not anger, instinctive fear. "Stella, I didn't know you were coming." His voice was careful now, measured. She placed her bag calmly on the main table beside his blueprints. "I wasn't," she said. Silence spread through the room. Jenna's pencil stopped moving. Logan stepped closer. "This isn't a good time." Stella looked around the studio slowly, taking in the space, the equipment, the branding, the lease signage. Then she said something very quietly. "This place exists because I made it possible." Logan blinked. "What?" She touched the corner of the table. "The initial lease guarantee." Another point. "The material credit line." Another. "The early operating liquidity." She looked directly at him. "I structured the risk profile that allowed this studio to survive its first 18 months. No anger, just fact. Logan didn't answer, because he couldn't. Stella picked up her bag. "I just wanted to understand where my investment went." She turned to leave, then paused. "And now I do." She walked out without raising her voice, without creating a scene, without revealing how much she already knew. Logan didn't follow her, because something had already shifted. Not in marriage, in control. And as Stella drove away, she realized something important. Logan still thought this was about an affair. He didn't understand yet. This was becoming about consequences. And Stella Kim had just started running the numbers. Logan expected anger. He expected shouting. He expected tears. What he wasn't prepared for was Stella being calm. That was the first thing that unsettled him. She didn't raise her voice, didn't accuse, didn't perform pain. She just stood across from him in his own studio like someone conducting an audit. And Logan Owen had never been comfortable being audited. "You went through my accounts?" he asked carefully. Stella tilted her head slightly. "No," she said. "I went through our accounts." The room stayed silent. Jenna looked between them, already sensing she had stepped into something much larger than an affair. Logan tried to recover authority. "You had no right to show up here like this." Stella didn't react. "I financed your right to be here." That landed hard. Logan's jaw tightened. "You always do this," he said. "Make everything transactional." Stella met his eyes calmly. "Those weren't dreams, Logan." She gestured lightly around the studio. "They were investments." No one spoke. Even the interns had gone completely still. Jenna finally stood slowly. "We never meant to hurt you." Stella looked at her. Not cruel, not warm, just precise. "You didn't hurt me," Stella said quietly. "You just misunderstood how long I was willing to carry the weight." Jenna didn't understand yet, but Logan did, because for the first time he wasn't dealing with his wife. He was dealing with Stella the strategist. "You control everything," Logan said. "There's no air with you, no space to just live." Stella considered that, then answered, "Structure isn't control." A small pause. "It's what kept you from failing." That sentence hit like a door closing. Logan looked around the room, trying to find sympathy. "You don't know what it feels like to live under constant expectations." Stella didn't blink. "I know what it feels like to pay for them." Silence, real silence, the kind where nobody moves. Logan tried again. "You make it sound like money is all that matters." Stella shook her head slightly. "No." She looked directly at him. "Integrity was supposed to matter too." Another pause. "But apparently that wasn't part of your design." Jenna looked down. Logan looked trapped. Because Stella wasn't emotional. She was factual. And facts are harder to argue with than feelings. Jenna whispered softly, "Maybe you've just grown apart." Stella gave a small, almost tired smile. "He didn't outgrow me." She looked at Logan. "He outsourced his responsibility." Logan slammed his hand lightly against the table. "Enough." Stella didn't flinch. That scared him more than if she had. "By next quarter," she said calmly, "my firm's financial backing will be withdrawn." Logan froze. "What?" "Our guarantee will be removed." Silence. "Our credit exposure will be closed." More silence. "Our liability coverage will end." Logan stared at her. "You can't just destroy everything." Stella picked up one of his drafting pencils, turned it slowly in her fingers, then snapped it clean in half. Not aggressively, effortlessly. "Watch me," she said quietly. That was the moment, the first real crack. Logan's confidence slipped, not dramatically, but visibly. "Stella, wait, we can fix this." First plea, not apology. Plea. "We already talked," she said. "You just preferred the version where nothing changed." Jenna tried one last time. "Love is complicated." Stella looked at her. "Love isn't complicated." A small pause. "Deception is." She turned and walked toward the exit. Logan called after her. "What are you going to do?" She didn't turn around. "What I always do." Pause. "I remove risk." That line stayed in the room after she left. Outside, the cold air hit her face, the kind that wakes you instead of hurting you. Behind the glass, Logan stood frozen. Jenna slowly sat down. And for the first time, Logan looked small inside a space Stella had made possible. That night, something unexpected happened. Stella didn't go home immediately. She went to her office. Because emotional decisions destroy leverage, strategic decisions build it. Her assistant looked surprised. "I thought you were taking the day." "I was," Stella said. "Now I'm taking control." 3 hours later, she had already scheduled legal review, asset exposure analysis, contract vulnerability mapping. That was when she met Owen Carter. Not dramatically, not romantically, professionally. He had been brought in months earlier as an external risk consultant for one of Stella's larger development projects. Precise, calm, observant. The kind of man who spoke only after understanding everything. He entered the conference room carrying a thin folder. I reviewed the preliminary numbers you requested. Stella nodded. How bad? Owen didn't dramatize. Financially? Pause. Recoverable. Another pause. Trust exposure? Longer pause. That depends on how decisive you're willing to be. Most people would have offered sympathy. Owen offered clarity. Stella respected that immediately. Tell me the truth, she said. Owen met her eyes. You've been carrying disproportionate structural risk for someone else's ambition. No pity, just analysis. And now, Owen answered simply, now you decide whether you continue financing instability. For the first time in days, Stella felt something unexpected. Not comfort, alignment. She nodded once. Then let's start removing variables. Owen didn't ask personal questions, didn't pry, didn't assume. He simply said, good. Pause. That's usually the moment recovery actually begins. Across the city, Logan sat alone in his studio long after everyone left. For the first time, he opened the financial dashboard Stella always managed. For the first time, he saw how much of his success had depended on her. And for the first time, he realized something terrifying. Stella wasn't trying to punish him. She was preparing to live without him. And that was far more dangerous. Because Logan finally understood something he should have understood years earlier. Stella Kim didn't fight chaos. She outgrew it. Logan didn't understand what was happening at first. Because collapse rarely looks dramatic in the beginning. It looks administrative. Monday morning, his corporate card declined. He assumed it was a bank error. Tuesday, a supplier called asking why their payment guarantee had been withdrawn. Wednesday, his landlord requested a meeting about revised lease liability. By Thursday, he started to understand. Stella wasn't reacting. She was restructuring reality. The first time panic truly appeared was when he tried accessing the main studio operating account. Access revoked. He refreshed. Same message. Again. Same message. Logan sat back slowly in his chair. For the first time since Stella walked out, he felt something unfamiliar. Not anger, not betrayal, instability. Jenna noticed immediately. Is everything okay? Logan forced a smile. Just administrative delays. But Jenna had grown up watching unstable men pretend things were fine. She recognized the tone. What kind of delays? Logan didn't answer, because at that exact moment, another notification appeared. Credit exposure review pending. That was when his stomach dropped. Across the city, Stella wasn't thinking about Logan. She was in a conference room with Owen Carter. 3 screens displayed risk summaries. Owen spoke calmly. You carried 70% of the financial exposure tied to his studio. Stella nodded. And now? Owen didn't hesitate. Now he discovers what unsupported leverage feels like. No cruelty, just analysis. Stella didn't smile. She just said, continue. Owen respected that. Most people wanted reassurance. Stella wanted accuracy. Meanwhile, Logan began making calls. Bank, university, vendor partners. Each conversation ended the same way. Careful language, professional tone, closed doors. We're reviewing our position. We no longer have guarantee backing. Your partner has withdrawn structural support. That word kept appearing. Partner. Logan finally understood something terrifying. Stella had never just been his wife. She had been his foundation. And foundations don't argue when they disappear. They simply stop holding weight. That afternoon, Jenna received an email from the university. Her research placement funding had been suspended pending review. She walked into Logan's office holding her phone. Did you know about this? Logan looked confused. What? They said the sponsorship structure changed. Silence. Then she asked the question Logan wasn't ready for. Was Stella funding this? Logan didn't answer fast enough. That was enough to answer. Jenna sat down slowly. You told me you were independent. Logan swallowed. I am. Jenna's voice was quiet now. Then why is everything connected to her? That was the first moment Jenna stopped seeing Logan as powerful and started seeing him as dependent. That shift was irreversible. Across town, Stella was finishing another meeting. Owen reviewed the last document. There's one more issue. Stella looked up. Personal exposure. He slid a file across the table. Logan had personally guaranteed several loans Stella had quietly secured years earlier. Without her coverage, the risk returned to him. Timeline? She asked. 30 to 90 days depending on liquidity. Stella nodded. Proceed. Owen studied her carefully. Most people showed hesitation at this stage. Stella showed resolution. You don't seem conflicted, he observed. Stella answered honestly. I already grieved the marriage. Pause. This is just a cleanup. Owen didn't say anything for a moment. Then, that's usually when people become dangerous. Stella didn't deny it. That evening, Logan called Stella. She didn't answer. He called again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. Finally, he texted, "We need to talk." She replied 2 hours later. "We already did." That was worse than silence, because it meant she wasn't avoiding him. She was finished explaining. By Friday, the social consequences began. One investor withdrew interest. Another delayed negotiations. A third requested revised risk disclosure. Logan started noticing something else. People weren't treating him the same. Conversations became shorter, handshakes weaker, promises vague. Because high performers attract support. Unstable ones attract distance. Friday afternoon, Jenna packed her bag early. "You're leaving?" Logan asked. "I have to think." "About what?" Jenna hesitated. "About what's real." That sentence hit harder than Stella's confrontation. Because Jenna wasn't angry. She was recalculating, just like Stella had. That night, Logan finally went home. The apartment felt different, quieter. Not because Stella was gone, because stability was gone. He opened the kitchen cabinet, saw the empty place where her routines used to exist. Her tea, her planning folders, her quiet systems that kept everything running. He hadn't noticed them when they existed. He noticed their absence immediately. He sat down and for the first time allowed himself to think something he had been avoiding. Maybe Stella wasn't controlling. Maybe she had been holding everything together. Meanwhile, Stella was having a very different evening. Not celebrating, not relaxing, rebuilding. Owen sat across from her reviewing a transition plan. "You've removed immediate exposure," he said. "Next phase is protection." Stella nodded. "And personally?" Owen asked carefully. Stella answered after a moment. "I thought losing him would feel like losing stability." Pause. "It turns out I was the stability." Owen gave the smallest approving nod. That was the first personal thing he had shown. Respect. No sympathy. Respect. And Stella noticed. That mattered more. Late Sunday, Logan called again. This time Stella answered. Not warmly, not coldly, neutrally. "Yes?" His voice sounded different, less certain. "Are you really going to destroy everything?" Stella answered calmly. "I'm not destroying anything." Pause. "I'm removing what was never yours." Silence. "Then, you could at least warn me?" Stella answered. "I did." "When?" "When I kept carrying everything." That ended the conversation. Sunday night, Jenna sent Logan a short message. "I need distance, not dramatic. Final." Logan stared at the screen a long time, because now he understood. He hadn't lost one relationship. He had lost two. Across the city, Stella closed her laptop. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself a long breath. Not relief. Completion of phase 1. And for the first time, she admitted something quietly to herself. She wasn't becoming harder. She was becoming clearer. And clarity was far more powerful than anger. What she didn't know yet was that Logan hadn't reached desperation? Not yet. That was still coming. Stella didn't feel victorious. That surprised her the most. There was no sense of triumph, no satisfaction, no dramatic feeling of revenge. Just something quieter. Balance. The first sign that everything was truly over came in the smallest possible way. Logan stopped calling, not because he didn't want to, because he finally understood she wouldn't answer. Barbara was next. She called one afternoon from a pharmacy, her voice shaking with controlled anger. "My card was declined." Stella listened without interrupting. "You're punishing all of us," Barbara said. Stella looked out the window at the gray Seattle skyline. "No," she said calmly. "I'm correcting an imbalance." Silence. "We depended on you," Stella answered quietly. That was the problem. Barbara hung up. No goodbye. Dependency rarely ends gracefully. Melissa texted later that night. Mom's upset. Things are getting hard. You need to fix this. Stella read the message, set the phone down, and for the first time in her adult life, did nothing. Because the version of Stella who rushed to repair everyone's instability no longer existed. Not because she became cold, because she became finished. 2 days later, Logan appeared at her building, unannounced, unprepared, arguing with security until Stella appeared in the lobby. He looked different, not dramatically, but unmistakably. Confidence gone, certainty gone. The posture of someone discovering consequences for the first time. You destroyed everything, he said through the security glass. Stella pressed the intercom button. No, she answered. I stopped financing it. That was the moment Logan understood. Not emotionally, structurally. You'll regret this. Stella shook her head slightly. Regret is for negotiations. Pause. I'm no longer negotiating. Logan stood there longer than necessary, because walking away meant accepting reality. Eventually he did, shoulders lower, steps slower. Not defeated, just unsupported. Later, Stella received confirmation the studio space had been fully reassigned. Logan's name was removed. Operational control transferred. Clean, final. She placed her wedding ring in a small wooden box where she kept expired access cards and old office keys, objects that once granted entry. Now just artifacts. 6 months passed. Time didn't heal anything. Time clarified everything. Logan's professional world had shrunk. Investors avoided risk. Universities avoided controversy. Clients avoided uncertainty. He found occasional contract work, nothing permanent. Because reputation isn't destroyed by scandal. It's destroyed by instability. Barbara moved in with distant relatives. Her calls became less frequent, not because she forgave Stella, because she understood dependence no longer worked. Melissa drifted between short-term jobs, each one ending the same way. Responsibility tends to expose people who relied on rescue. Jenna left quietly. No confrontation, no drama, just absence. Someone Stella knew at the university mentioned she had withdrawn from the program. Not because of Stella, because fantasy requires stability, and Logan no longer had any to offer. Across the city, Stella's life became something unfamiliar. Calm, not empty, not lonely, just calm. Work became cleaner. Decisions became simpler. Energy stopped leaking into other people's chaos. Her promotion came that spring, not from sympathy, from performance. One evening, a colleague asked how she stayed so composed through everything. Stella thought for a moment, then answered honestly, I stopped managing problems that weren't mine. It sounded simple. It wasn't. Some nights she walked along the waterfront after work, watching reflections move across the water, thinking about something she hadn't understood before. People had called her controlling. What they really meant was, she had boundaries, and boundaries scare people who depend on access. One evening, Owen joined her after a late meeting. No dramatic moment, no declaration, just quiet company. You seem lighter, he observed. Stella considered that. I'm not lighter, she said. Pause. I'm just no longer carrying what was never mine. Owen nodded. That was enough. He didn't try to become important. He didn't try to be needed. And that was exactly why Stella trusted him. Not because he offered rescue, because he respected independence. That mattered more. For years, Stella believed love meant endurance. That if she carried enough weight, balance would eventually return. It never did. It only taught people her limits were negotiable. What saved her wasn't anger. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't even distance. It was precision. She didn't destroy Logan's life. She removed herself from supporting it, and everything unstable revealed itself naturally. That was the final lesson. Some people think strength is fighting harder. Sometimes strength is simply stepping back, letting gravity do the rest. 1 year later, Stella realized something unexpected. She no longer thought about Logan. Not because she forgave him, because he was no longer relevant to who she was becoming. And that was the real ending. Not revenge, not justice, irrelevance. That was the day Stella Kim finally understood something she wished she had known years earlier. Peace doesn't come from fixing people. It comes from no longer financing their chaos. She learned that love should never require you to disappear. That loyalty without reciprocity isn't devotion. It's slow erosion. And that the most powerful word an intelligent person can learn is enough. Because the day she stopped trying to save what was breaking her was the day her real life finally began. If this story made you feel something, hit that like button. Drop a comment telling us what you would have done in the main character's place, and subscribe to Sinner Stories so you never miss a new video.